I just drove 22 hours on Uber using this rented Tesla Model 3. And yes, in this video, I'm giving you the complete review. But your takeaway is, number one, if you're looking for a side hustle, is driving for Uber even worth it? Number two, if you want to rent a vehicle for rideshare, Uber, is the Uber Hertz rental program worth it? And number three, if you're familiar with rideshare, did I actually make more money than you? I'm going to make this really easy for us. I have just 4 categories. That's it. How it works, surprises, problems, and ultimately, of course, a very detailed breakdown of the numbers. So number one, how this works. Again, it's a Uber Hertz partnership for this rental program. And here in Pittsburgh, at least, it was a 2022 Tesla Model 3. And this is actually the second week I'm doing this, so a little context there. Now, the cost was $392 for 1 week. And if you're thinking that's expensive, well, it is, because you can rent just a regular gas vehicle from Hertz to use for Uber for less. And there's also a $200 refundable security deposit. Of course, you get that back when you return the vehicle. And I believe the rep here in Pittsburgh said there's about 40 Teslas on this Uber Hertz program. So take a look at the actual vehicle here. Again, Tesla Model 3. This is the 2022 model. They have the standard range as well as the long range. You'll pay a little bit more for that. These have the silver sport wheels versus the dark gray Aero wheels. And you have the option of white, gray, blue, and red. And they actually did give me an option when I was picking up the vehicle, just what color I wanted, obviously based on the available stock. Now, if you didn't know, just traditionally the most popular rental vehicle is white. So if you think that's going to help you earn more, there you go. As someone who has years of experience driving Uber and Lyft to different marketplaces, thousands of trips here, and jumping back into this in late 2022 or 2023, whenever you're watching this video, the first concern I had was the same thing back in 2015, 2016, and that is the unknown of the passengers that are getting in your vehicle. Now, what I like now, and this might depend on your status of Uber Pro or your marketplace, but I can see the starting and the ending destination of the trip. That is massive. I could not see that years ago. So being able to see how much am I going to make, the passenger's star rating, and again, that starting and ending destination, I love that. That is how it should be done. If your ride requests do show you the passenger rating, if it is out of a, let's say, 5-star scale, right, then I would use discretion on 5.0, like perfectly rated passengers. Now, here's the thing. If someone's using rideshare for a while, like Uber in this case, right? That's what we're talking about. Eventually, they're going to get something less than a 5-star rating. So they'll be like a 4.93 passenger. So if you get someone that's a 5.0, no, it doesn't mean that it's a bad passenger, but it could mean it's a new account, which kind of adds a little bit of ambiguity. They're new, they're not vetted by other drivers, but again, maybe they've taken 3 rides and yes, they got completely perfect ratings, just food for thought. And another concern for Uber really is the unknowns of some navigation in the roads. Now, I'm very familiar with Pittsburgh. I live in the city central, basically. I've grew up in the surrounding areas. I know the city, but I don't know each and every single road. If you can, and if you can safely, that's the most important thing, is looking ahead on your navigation to see exactly, okay, is it a soft left, the second left, an immediate sharp left, followed by an immediate right, things like that. Because I'll give you an example. An area that I've driven a ton for rideshare and food delivery, I'm very familiar, is Oakland here in Pittsburgh. It's where a lot of the campuses are. And the Google Maps navigation took us to the back, basically, of the campus. Like underneath part of this campus, I had no idea, but there was a hall that my passenger and I were navigating to, and there was construction, and we passed it, hit a roadblock, had to back up, and we found the hall that we ultimately passed. So that was kind of surprising. So speaking of, let's go into the surprises that I encountered throughout this week's worth of driving. So number one, that you'll 100% have on Uber or Lyft when it comes to rideshare is passengers changing the ending destinations. So you'll get a ping on Uber. It says, ending destination changed, and it tells you that. Well, what can happen is I started my trip, and just as we're about to leave, the passenger says,
"Hey, can we actually add an ending destination?
After this,
can we go to the airport?"
And my strategy is to stay generally within the city. Now, here in Pittsburgh, the airport is 25 minutes away without traffic. And, there's a whole strategy there. You go to the staging lot, you pick up an arrival, and you head back to wherever, right? But I wanted to stay in the city center because that's the order, the ride, I should say, that I initially accepted. And when was this? This was 5:15 p.m., right in the middle of rush hour. So that 25-minute trip took us about 50 minutes. All right, but one Tesla-specific surprise, because that's what we're talking about here, right? This Uber Hertz Tesla rental option at $392, basically $400 a week. So yeah, it's expensive. One surprise was not really the range anxiety, like I was afraid I wouldn't have enough mileage, but almost the charging availability anxiety, I would say. So what I mean by that is when you're charging the Tesla, ideally at a Tesla supercharger, it's going to be easier, better infrastructure, possibly faster speeds, that is it going to be available? Like, are spots going to be available, or am I going to have to wait for charging? Now, if you didn't know, on your Tesla navigation, it'll say how many stalls are available. Again, it says 2 stalls available. But when I would charge, and I charged twice during this week, that there was at least one point where briefly, as it were, it was just briefly, but all stalls were taken. All right, next surprise, going back to the pay, because pay surprises are never fun. But this surprise was that Boost Plus pay shown here. So certain amount of hours, usually an hour interval, you'll get an extra $250, $350, $450 I saw here in Pittsburgh, which is very good. But I was pretty surprised of the availability of Boost Plus pay. So I had maybe 2 days which had a lot of Boost Plus pay. And again, it's only for hour intervals. And I will say it was pretty good at times, $3.50, $4.50, which is excellent, but it wasn't every day. And I'll tell you, if you don't have Boost Plus, and let's say you don't even have Surge because they're different. So the Boost Plus is predictable scheduled bonus pay, and then the Surge is real-time changing per trip bonus pay. So if you don't have Boost Plus, hopefully you have Surge. If you don't have Surge, hopefully you have Boost Plus. But if you don't have both, if you don't have either of those, then I was surprised, well, not even surprised, but it's going to be a tough day if you don't have both. Next surprise, which also directly deals with income. And before we do that, can you drop a like on this video? Consider subscribing. We'd love to have you part of the team here. Feel free. But it was the shockingly low percentage of passenger tips. I mean, food delivery, I have at least 80%, usually 90% of my customers leave me a tip. But I would say I had maybe 20%, maybe 15%, probably more accurately, of my passengers that left me a tip. All right, but all of this, the problems, the pay rate, the bonus pay, the passengers, which actually were surprisingly respectful. There's another surprise there. I had really good passengers. But again, the problem of still the unknowns. So all of that, when it comes down to doing this as a side hustle, was it worth it by the numbers? So here's the entire spreadsheet. You and I are going to go over this here and come to the ultimate verdict. So take a look here. So here's the shift, how many hours I was online. We can see that also represented numerically here. How many hours? Averaging 4.55 hours per day. So a little bit different here versus the last time I did this. I believe I drove 6 days out of the week. This time I only drove 5 days, and I drove a total of 22.75 hours. So the gross revenue basically is directly related to how much of that Boost Plus pay that I got. It was not related to tips. It was directly related to the Surge and the Boost Plus pay. So the $280 and $285, that was the Boost Plus actually plus Quest bonuses. That's another thing I haven't mentioned yet. So without that, I would not have made what I made. So the Quest bonuses, I do X and then I get an additional bonus. So the one was do 15 rides and get an additional $150, which is excellent. $10 per trip. And that's on top of the surge, the tips, and any Boost Plus pay. So that is one thing that I do really like on Uber and Uber Eats are those stackable bonuses. So the gross revenue, $943.18 with a gross revenue per hour before the expenses, before the rental cost, $41.51, which that's surprising to me. And again, that is really a testament to that bonus pay. So next, looking at the trips completed, this doesn't really tell the whole story. So average per day, 11.2, but this really does tell the busyness of rideshare a little bit better. So trips per hour average 2.45 trips per hour. Now, compared to other side hustles, that's about right. So I always say you're only going to do 2 to 4 trips, transactions per hour, shopping gigs, grocery gigs, food delivery, parcel delivery. It's a little bit different if you have a shift versus, let's say, Walmart Spark, and then rideshare. But basic per order, per request apps, you're going to do about, again, 2 to 4 of those per hour. So the tips, I mean, look at this. The average tips here per day was $12. Now, I mean, in the context, if I'm doing 11 trips per day, and if I'm averaging 12 tips per day, that's like nothing. Averaging like $1 or $2. So business miles here, an average 63 per day, a total though of 318 business miles. So tax deduction here using the standard IRS business rate for the end of 2022 here, $198.71, and a payout per mile right here, $297. That is excellent. So our channel goal here is $1.75. I don't want you really, $1.20 is your absolute rock bottom floor. $1.50 is a more realistic floor where you're still doing okay. But $1.75 plus a $2 to $3 is a sweet spot. If you're doing $2 to $3 paid out per mile, then you're running an efficient side hustle. So charging, we can see here the 2 sessions, one adding 70% to the battery, another adding 85%. Both of those took around 45 minutes. Now, I did talk about preconditioning the battery on the Tesla. Click navigate, click the supercharger, and then it'll navigate and precondition the battery to the supercharger. But more importantly, the charging cost here, $32.29 in total. So that's going to get invoiced when I return the vehicle, and then your cost per minute. So, okay, let's go over the final numbers here. So the gross revenue, just simply what I earned in my Uber account just from the pay, $943.18. Now, minus that weekly rental cost, right? $392.06 for the Tesla. Also subtract the total charging cost because I'm going to have to pay for that. $32.29. So my net revenue after the expenses was $518.83. So forget that $40 some an hour gross. The actual net revenue per hour after the expenses, so this total divided by the 22.75 hours equals $22.81 per hour. This was a sample size of a more normal week. Now, let me ask you this before you leave the video, and if you're going to go, drop a like and consider subscribing. What's the benefit of renting the Tesla? So with the EV, you get an extra $1 per trip. So I did 56 trips. So I got an extra $56 just for having the EV on Uber. If I just use my personal vehicle, I got a gig vehicle that I use. If I just use that, I would have had the $943.18, well, actually a little bit less than that. So $890 or whatever it is, $890, because we're not getting that 50 some dollars for the EV rates. But I would have that divided by the 22.75 hours. So number one, would I make more money than someone just using their personal vehicle or even a cheaper rental? Probably not. Number two, who should even do this considering renting the Tesla if you want to rent anything versus renting a cheaper vehicle or just using a personal vehicle? I mean, yes, there is $1 extra per trip. Yes, passengers seem to like it, but that didn't really equate to more tips. Clearly, I didn't get a lot of tips at all. I mean, there's the wait time for the charging, 45 minutes per session. I had to charge twice. The other week I did this, I charged 3 times. And obviously I'm liable for the charging. It's not super expensive, but then there's the weekly cost. So who wins with the Tesla rental? Final verdict, it's a cool vehicle. I like driving it. My personal vehicle is a Tesla. I did $22.81 even after the expenses, but I would have made more with my personal vehicle. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video. If you missed week 1, by the way, you can click or tap the screen right here or right here for my newest video, and I'll see you in the next one.